Hi, everyone. I'm Elaine Quijano. President Trump is vowing to put America first as he clashed with NATO allies in Brussels Wednesday. The president stood alone in his request for allies to increase spending on defense.
This has been going on for decades, and it's disproportionate and not fair to the taxpayers of the United States, and we're going to make it fair, so that'll be it.
Mr. Trump took aim at Germany, saying the country has gotten far too close to Russia. Our Major Garrett is in Brussels with more.
Germany is totally controlled by Russia.
President Trump confirmed Europe's worst pre-summit fears by using the NATO stage to criticize allies, blasting Germany over a natural gas pipeline deal with Russia.
It's very sad when Germany makes a massive oil and gas deal with Russia, where you're supposed to be guarding against Russia, and Germany goes out and pays billions and billions of dollars a year to Russia.
German officials deny that the controversial Nord Stream 2 pipeline will allow Russia to exert undue influence over their country. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg tried to keep the peace.
We are stronger together than apart.
But how can you be together when a country is getting its energy from the person you want protection against or from the group that you want protection?
Because we understand that when we stand together, also when dealing with Russia, we are stronger.
Later, President Trump and German Chancellor Angela Merkel exchanged pleasantries for the cameras during a one-on-one meeting. But Merkel, who grew up in communist East Germany, told reporters earlier, "I've experienced myself how a part of Germany was controlled by the Soviet Union," and said her country today made independent policies and independent decisions. The NATO summit is usually a chance for member nations to reaffirm their commitment to an alliance that focuses on Afghanistan, Syria, Ukraine, and other world hotspots. But President Trump appeared determined to upset that tradition, demanding NATO countries spend 4% of their gross domestic product on defense, up from the 2% the U.S. has previously requested.
We're protecting everybody, and yet we're paying a lot of money to protect.
Stoltenberg said NATO should focus for now on reaching the 2% goal by 2024, something just 5 of the 29 nations have done. The U.S. is at 3.5%, $685 billion last year.
We have to step it up immediately.
CBS News Chief White House correspondent Major Garrett joins me now from Brussels. Major, the president focused much of Wednesday's meetings on his criticism of the alliance's defense spending. How much of his public remarks, you think, were for domestic consumption here in the U.S., and how much were aimed at the allies?
Well, they're aimed at both audiences, and they will probably be very well received by Trump supporters who heard them during the campaign and want the president to follow through. But I guarantee you, and I can tell you firsthand here in Brussels, they landed with a noticeable thud. Look, there is a great concern here, Elaine, about the very future of this alliance, this post-World War II construct of mutual self-defense and common military alliance. Why? It's not that the president's issues, burden sharing, 2% of GDP, maybe raising that, isn't a legitimate issue. In fact, many member nations of NATO agree that it is. But the president's methods go to the heart of what an alliance is, at least what it means to these other member nations. They know the United States is the most powerful economy. They know the United States is the most powerful military force within NATO. And what they've always believed is working in common defense and in pursuit of consensus is the way the alliance remains strong. That's certainly the perspective of nations like Germany, France, Britain, and others. With the president appearing here to sow divisions when everyone knows he's going to leave here, go to London briefly, and then go to Helsinki for his first lengthy face-to-face with Russian President Vladimir Putin, a force that many Europeans worry about and want NATO to be strengthened in defense of, strikes them as borderline belligerent and undermining the very values and the very idea about consensus that the NATO alliance was always built around. So can you deal with hard issues and find consensus? That's a decent question. President Trump is sort of asking it in his own way. But I guarantee you, if President Obama were part of this conversation, he would say, in fact, you can. Because in 2014 in Wales, he was there, President Obama was, and told NATO member nations, For years, your defense allocations have been declining. You've got to increase them. And by consensus, NATO members agreed to boost all of their defense spending by 2024. In fact, that's been the trajectory ever since 2014. Steady increases by member nations within NATO, not named the United States. So you can do this. It can be done. In fact, President Obama did it. What President Trump wants is to accelerate that process. But his methods here, his language here, the harshness of his presentation has left many wondering if the alliance can withstand that kind of rhetoric and that kind of intensity, because if it's about consensus, it's hard to find here in Brussels.
Well, Democratic Senator Dick Durbin voiced concern about that meeting that President Trump is set to have with Vladimir Putin. Let's listen to some of that.
What the president is doing is antagonizing our allies and embracing our traditional enemies and foes. It's got to be confusing. The president's sense of history goes back to the day before yesterday. He doesn't understand the NATO alliance, which for 70 years has kept Europe safe and the world safe for that matter. And he is trashing our allies who have invested lives and their own resources into making this a success. At the same time, he embraces Putin, calls him a fine man. It must be impossible for our allies to figure out exactly what the United States is saying.
So, Major, you spoke about the concern there from allies. I wonder how administration officials that you've spoken with are responding to this sense of concern among NATO members.
A couple of things that they will say in the president's defense. One, a stronger NATO with more rapid increases in alliance-wide defense spending makes NATO itself stronger, makes it more formidable, makes it better capable of living up to its self-defense credo. So the White House would argue the president is just trying to make the alliance stronger by demanding nations move faster toward a common defense. That's one perspective. That's certainly the president's perspective. The other thing they will say about Putin and the upcoming meeting is the president doesn't have a formal defined agenda. He's going to see what he can get from Putin, and the European leaders are needlessly anxious that the president will be talked into something injurious to their interests or America's interests. White House officials insist the president is not going to be sandbagged by Vladimir Putin. He's not going to give away things that undermine the United States or undermine Europe. That's the White House position. I would just remind our audience, before the president flew to Singapore to meet with Kim Jong-un, we were told beforehand he would achieve great things, and while we were there, we were told the summit did achieve great things and denuclearization would be set forth and put together in rapid order. Nothing has happened since Singapore. In fact, all the signals from Pyongyang and North Korea have been the same hardline negotiating positions that they assumed before the Singapore summit. So we have some recent history here about White House expectations being unrealized in high-profile, made-for-television summits.
Meanwhile, here in the U.S., farmers are beginning to feel the effects of retaliatory tariffs on several products. And it was interesting, the president tweeted about them while in Brussels. What does that suggest to you, Major, about the president's own political situational awareness regarding his base, of which farmers were a key element?
Well, certainly the Midwest itself, partly farmers, partly those in manufacturing, and lots of others, supported Donald Trump because they believed in either his America First agenda, wanting to drive a harder bargain on trade, or generate more jobs for the U.S. economy. On the latter part, generating more jobs, President Trump has been successful. There's no question about that. The data is there for everyone to see. What's interesting now is, having achieved that success, creating more jobs and a slight increase in wages, what now appears to be is instability in the markets caused by the president's own hard line on trade. And China and other nations are taking reciprocal tariff actions against the United States, many times, specifically China, targeting exports from the farm belt of the United States. That means price instability, that means denied market access, and that means less revenue, less livelihood for those American farmers. The president has said on Twitter and in public remarks over and over, he's going to find a way to help them out. Those ways have not been determined. There's no legislation in Congress that's going to do this. The Farm Bill is going to a conference committee before the House and the Senate. It doesn't have any particular mechanism in there to put money back into the farmers' pockets if it's lost due to a trade war or a trade skirmish with China or anyone else. So the president has Twitter promises, some public relations promises on this score, but so far nothing specific. And if this trade skirmish with China escalates to a full-blown trade war, one of the first and most important frontiers in that trade battle will be in the heartland of America.
Major Garrett in Brussels for us. Major, thanks very much.
You got it.